Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's AP Euro semester exam midterm review broadcast. So thank you very much. And let me go ahead and turn the volume down here. Let your friends know that I'm here, okay? Let them know that we're going to be reviewing for a little while. And thank you. Looks like we've got the chat going. Great to see you, David, and plenty of other great people. So I'm going to be taking questions via Twitter at Tom Richey. So you can go to Twitter. That's where I'm going to be taking the questions. Also, if you look into the description, there are a few links that might be of interest to you. So as we start off here, let me just rattle off just a few things that are available in case you want to do that. Now, of course, these reviews are free for everybody, but, you know, I welcome people that support my channel in various ways. So feel free to do that. Of course, if you're somebody who just watches an ad once in a while, I think that's great. So first of all, I have a page here for it's tomrichey.net/AP Euro Midterm. Okay, and what I've done here is I've picked six. Okay, so we've got it's still football season technically, right? So I've picked 6 videos that I think are especially helpful in preparing you for your midterm. Also, remember that the Romulus Euro app is available at the App Store. There's a free demo version that is available as well, which actually that might this link is not this link is not current. Okay, that link's not current, but Romulus Euro, and then there is a free version of that if you look up Romulus apps at the App Store. Now, this is on Google Play as well, so Romulus apps are available on the App Store and at Google Play. I've got some handouts, strategy guides, a little bit of test prep advice. Make sure you get some sleep, okay, and that sort of thing. I'd love for you to binge watch my videos. Make sure you get some sleep. So Romulus apps are available. Also, custom short videos. If you want a little greeting for your class, for your teacher, I do holiday greetings, also dance proposals, student council candidacy, shout out to your teacher or class, birthday wishes. If you want me to appear on your video project, you want me to film a little bit to appear on your video project, I'm glad to do that. I'm also glad to help with pranks, okay? Now, the other thing, since we are at this point here, the AP tutoring services, if you just go over there in the online store and you will see where you can book tutoring. Now, this can be individual or for a group. So remember that this is available to you anytime this year that you've got a big test, whether you want individual help or you want help with your study group, then that's great. Also, remember that my friends at Fiveable are doing Kahoot games, and there will be an AP Euro Kahoot game with Fiveable on Wednesday, okay? And that we may even stream that on my channel. So just stay tuned for all of that, ladies and gentlemen. And again, questions on Twitter, okay? Questions on Twitter at Tom Richey. I'll also be shouting out to new Instagram followers and new Snapchat followers. So I'll be doing that here and there throughout the broadcast, okay? So Instagram is at Tom Richey. Snapchat is Tom Richey SC. Instagram and Twitter are the same. Okay, and thank you to my friend Kathy for advertising this. All right, so as far as that goes, I don't see any questions in Twitter yet. All right, so yes, I tell you, I wrote a DBQ today, like actually wrote it. I didn't just type it. Like teachers typically will make samples and we'll type them. We kind of cheat a little bit, but I actually wrote one today and it hurt my hand. That's what I was tweeting about earlier. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, oh, we've got somebody from the Bornfeld gang. I tell you, I love it. I love it. Okay, Dan Bornfeld, rich history there going all the way back to Layla Cherry and Nicole, like way back in the day. Yes, I'd be glad to go over absolutism, but now remember, in a setting like this, specific questions are great. Okay, so if you have, this is really as far as that, hey, I'm glad that your teacher told you that. Thank your teacher for me. Okay, so as far as that goes, just remember that for a setting like this, specific questions are generally preferred. Absolutism is a whole unit. Come on, y'all, get your questions in here. I am looking for questions. So go ahead and ask a question, get those in. So what's European history? Wow, that's a lot. Okay, so Mish, you're asking what was the cause of the Hundred Years' War? Now, the cause of the Hundred Years' War was a dynastic dispute, but the thing is, you don't need to get into that because the Hundred Years' War will not be on the AP European history exam. Even though we start generally in the course of the Middle Ages, it's generally, unless it is something about the printing press or Petrarch. Okay, Petrarch and the printing press, those are kind of some exceptions there that you're seeing pre 1450. Okay, so I would not anticipate that you'd ever see a question about the Hundred Years' War on the AP Euro exam because it all happened there before 1450. So as far as that Salma, there is a link to my AP Euro midterm page on in the video description. Okay, so Daniel, what did the social contract do? Okay, what did the social contract do? And again, Salma, I've got a handy little web page linked in the video description, tomrichey.net/AP Euro midterm. Okay, so as far as that goes, what did the social contract do? So there are a couple of different theories of government. Now, one of the theories of government we run into in the AP Euro course is the top down. Okay, so going from the top down, like the divine right of kings. Okay, that God places the king on the throne to rule the people. Now, the social contract is the bottom up version of this. Okay, the social contract says that God didn't create governments, people created governments. So, and the social contract really is, it's a fluid thing because every group of people that has a government, they've got a different social contract that has put that together. So you can see that there are so many different types of government in the Western world today that, you know, they've set that up. And so people agree to place authority over them. Now, what is the reason for that? Okay, so you've got three social contract theorists that you need to be familiar with for AP European history: Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Now, Thomas Hobbes, why do we set up the social contract? We set up the social contract to keep from killing each other. Thomas Hobbes writes of a state of war. Now, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, they all write about like assuming that people come from a state of nature. Think about our earliest hunting and gathering ancestors. And in order to survive and in order to protect their life, liberty, and property, they enter into this social contract and they accept someone's authority over them, because without that system of authority, then none of their stuff is safe. And so Hobbes wrote that the state of nature is a state of war, bellum omnium contra omnes, a war of all against all. And in this war of all against all, the only way to keep people from killing each other is to create a very strong absolute authority that is so strong that it cannot be questioned and its authority cannot be compromised. Now, Thomas Hobbes was writing in the backdrop of the English Civil War. And so what you saw there was that Parliament saw that Charles I was weak enough and they challenged him and they took him down. And so to Hobbes, the Leviathan that comes from this biblical story in the book of Job. And so this huge sea monster, that who can challenge this person? And so for Hobbes, the best way to make sure that we have a peaceful and stable society is that we have this absolute authority that is so strong it cannot be questioned. Now, John Locke, who of course is writing with the backdrop of the Glorious Revolution, he's seen that not every change in government is accompanied by massive bloodshed. Okay, some of them are, but not necessarily. And so John Locke puts forward this constitutional kind of view of the social contract, and a very individualistic view that I enter into the social contract to protect my life, liberty, and property. And then I create a government with the help of my friends, and we all get together, we create this government. And so with that, we create this government together, and then we realize this government's not meeting my needs anymore. This government is not protecting my life, liberty, and property. So as far as that goes, then I have the right of revolution. Now Hobbes would be like, oh, no, 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 we don't want revolution, because that takes us back into the state of war, which is of course what Hobbes saw in the English Civil War. But with Locke and the Glorious Revolution, it is possible to have a change in government without reverting back to the state of nature. And so that's why Locke says that, there is a right of revolution. The people can come together and they can reconstitute their government. Now, in the case of the Glorious Revolution, you were taking institutions that already existed beforehand and you're just clarifying that relationship. The whole thing about the Stuarts, the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution. Stay hydrated, kids. The thing about that is that it's a tension. It's tension between the king and the parliament, okay, which before the Stuarts, the parliament really wasn't anything to speak of. But parliament was starting to kind of come to its own during the Stuarts. And there was a lot of tension between the monarchy, which was trying to get more absolute and have an even lesser role for parliament than the Tudors had for it. And parliament's like, you know what, we're kind of ready to take charge. And so what you see from James the First, Charles the First, Charles II, James II, is this uncertainty about who's in charge. So, you could bring in a little Thomas Hobbes there. And then after the Glorious Revolution, it is settled that Parliament is going to do the governing. And that is because of a social contract. So the Glorious Revolution was an amendment of the social contract. And we see Locke's version of the social contract, which is very familiar to us. Now, there's also Rousseau, who was a social contract theorist. Now, Rousseau put the social back in social contract. While Locke was much more individualistic, Rousseau is more curious about the whole, okay? So about the general will. So government is created in order to be an instrument of the general will. But just like with Hobbes and Locke, government is not ordained from above. Government is created by people in order to suit their needs. Now, remember, Locke, it's much more individualistic. My life, my liberty, my property. And whereas Rousseau, this is about the general will. I'm about to go to, that's right, man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains. That is the first line of the social contract and the most often quoted, the book by Rousseau called The Social Contract. So that book peaked really, really early. I'm about to go to Instagram at Tom Richey, and I'm going to shout out to my new followers. If I've got any new Instagram followers, I'm about to give those people a shout out. Okay, so all right, we've got Wise Mata, whoever that is, who kind of drowned everybody out because they went through like spamming. And yeah, but anyway, any new Instagram followers, we're going to be able to put that. You know what? I think I may just go have to block Wise Mata if this person's watching. Okay, so stop doing that. J.R. Wood 50, James Lynn, Molly Stevens. Okay, has just followed from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm a big fan of Louisville, Kentucky. Avery Bruntmeyer and Julia Bassina. Thank y'all so much for the follows on Instagram. J Trash and Vivian Trin. All right, so glad to see y'all here, and it looks like we got some folks liking stuff. Aria Solano, is it Solano or is it Solano? So as far as that goes, thank you for the likes on there. All right, and it looks like maybe Tori's watching tonight as well, a recent follower. All right. So as far as that goes, let's see. So we're going to go back to the questions and see what we can get there. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So let's see what we've got on the Twitter. All right, let's see what we've got on the Twitter. Okay, and yes, Karl Marx AP Gov final. That okay, yeah, that's unrelated, but still quite funny. All right. Let's see, absolutism as it relates to Louis the 14th. All right. Thank you so much, David, for your question there. Okay. Now, before we get to that, I've got a couple questions about the French Wars of Religion. All right. So, as far as the causes, what we've got there, we've got that France, of course, was a Catholic country, and you've got, Huguenots. All right. So, Huguenots, these are folks that are French Calvinist. Okay, so they're followers of John Calvin, French Calvinist, and they are. Wait, somebody try to correct me on that. I don't know what some. Okay, so yes. Thank you, Natalie. Okay, so yeah, there are a few people that needed some shouts out and such. Okay, so I want to make sure that I don't leave anybody out. All right. So as far as that, it looks like Tori might want a follow back. Let's go ahead and make sure that happens. All right. So the French Wars of Religion. France was a Catholic country, but you had Calvinists, okay, which were Huguenots. I picture John Calvin in a spacesuit. Okay, that's what I think about. So to remember Huguenot. And the thing is about Calvinist is it's rare that you actually, I mean, besides Scotland and the Netherlands, it's rare that you have a Calvinist country. Okay, like there isn't really like among the great powers. I don't know of any Calvinist countries. Okay, and so basically you've got these Calvinist communities just kind of dotted throughout France. And the French monarchy, Catherine de Medici is really the most visible name there. Her sons were the ones who were kings, but she was much more influential, power behind the throne, and they were trying to preserve Catholicism. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Now there were people on both sides killing each other, but the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre was specifically a massacre of Protestants that was condoned by the Catholic faction controlling the government. And so, as far as the French Wars of Religion, one thing you need to know is politique. Okay, politique, which looks like politicue. So Henry IV, Henry of Navarre, who was a leader of the Calvinists, the Huguenots, he ended up winning the French Wars of Religion, and because France was a Catholic country, it was a politique. Politiques, they put the country over religion. Okay. So in terms of, thinking, you know what? France, a Catholic country, he allegedly said Paris is worth a mass. Okay, Paris is worth a mass. That's what he's saying. That essentially, I'm the king of a Catholic country, so I'm going to become Catholic. Now, he also issued the Edict of Nantes. Okay, so the Edict of Nantes, what you're looking at there is that he proclaimed that he was going to tolerate, he was going to tolerate Huguenot communities. Okay, so that was Huguenot communities will be tolerated. Okay, and so now that, of course, was rescinded later by Louis the 14th. And so, getting to Louis the 14th, David's question here, that Louis the 14th, his program was one king, one law, one faith. Now, of course, rescinding the Edict of Nantes was part of this one faith doctrine. Okay, that as far as absolute rule, there needs to be in terms of, there is one king. There's one king at Versailles. Louis moved himself out of Paris, Tuileries, this palace where the king typically lived in Paris, and then moved over to Versailles, built himself a magnificent palace at Versailles, which is a little bit outside of Paris, which was pretty far out of Paris at that, as far as the size of Paris at that time. And so Louis separated himself from the people. Okay, so separated himself because he's the king. Okay, so he's above everyone, the Sun King. That's why he picked that, because the sun shines on everyone. It doesn't move. It's not on the ground. It's not an animal or anything like that. Okay, so as far as that goes, Louis, the Sun King. Now, one law, Louis never quite got to the one law thing. Okay, so never quite got to the one law. There is a code Louis, but he didn't quite get to the point of Napoleon. And then there's one faith. So Louis rescinded the Edict of Nantes and then declared that France will be a Protestant country. Now, one thing I didn't know until recently, if any of my friends are watching from Puerto Rico, one of of my friends over there, Carla, was asking about Frederick William the Great Elector, which when Louis issued the Edict of Fontainebleau, if I don't know if I said that right, it's a written test, correct? And so then Frederick William the Great Elector, who was a Calvinist, but he was ruling a Lutheran people. Okay, so Prussia was predominantly Lutheran, but the Hohenzollern, if I said that, but anyway, y'all know what I'm talking about. They were this dynasty, they were Calvinist. And so he issued the Edict of Potsdam, which welcomed these exiled French Protestants to Prussia, Brandenburg, because, Louis like, get out of here if you're not Catholic. And the Prussians, they needed people. They'd been devastated by the 30 Years' War. And there you go. And one more thing about politique. Now, politique we also see in the 40 Years' War. We also see it in the 30 Years' War with Cardinal Richelieu, as far as that goes. Now, as far as your question, Jerry, Henry IV, I would just know that he issued the Edict of Nantes, and that would be, that'd be fine. And that's really Henry's attempt to rebuild France, so to speak, that he's trying to create a situation where these two groups can exist alongside each other. Now, by the time Louis comes around, Louis, his grandson, was a devout Catholic, and Catholics made up by far the majority of the people in France, the vast majority. And Louis's revocation of the Edict of Nantes was actually very, very popular in France. All right, so shout out to David Grooms. Okay, yes, David Grooms, one of my favorite teachers. I tell you, I try to have dinner with that guy at least once a year over in Valdosta, Georgia, actually in Kansas City, but he's from Valdosta, Georgia. Okay, and I still see that there are some people from Bornfeld's class. Let's go over to Snapchat real quick. Tom Richey SC. Okay, so we're going to go over to Snapchat and see who's following me over there. But let's before we leave Instagram, thank you, Emily Saladino, for the follow. Okay, so very good to see you following me on Instagram, as well as Holly Den Hartog and Aubrey. Don't Jingle, KT Slaughter, Original Roger, Angela, and GH .nhi. All right, so we're gonna take a quick trip over to Snapchat. So let's take a look at that. And remember, ask questions via Twitter. I haven't seen too many questions on Twitter, so we need to see that. I need some more questions. Charlie Wheeler, Brandon, Hinajosa, let's see, Nolan, Gabby, Martinez, Eli, Anjali, Manasi, Christian, Avery, Leo, Kate, Paige, Alyssa, Selly or Chelly, is it like the instrument, or I don't know, but Cece, I think, Alyssa, all right, as well. Thank y'all so much for the Snapchat follows, and let's go back to Twitter and see what we've got there. Hey, John Montoya from South America. All right, so as far as that goes, I'm still not seeing any questions on Twitter. It's my preferred medium for this sort of thing. It's the easiest to keep up with. Thank you, Angela, for the Twitter follow. Maybe you're going to follow up with a question. Okay, so let's go ahead and get those questions in on Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's get them in, get them in, get them in. All right, and let's see. Maybe we've got something in the chat. The Counter-Reformation. Okay, I'll go over the Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation is basically the Catholic response to the Reformation. Now, it's important to note that the Counter-Reformation actually has, two components, okay? First of all, there is against the Reformation, Counter-Reformation. Now, there's another one, though, where you go into, what they call the Catholic Reformation, which is still Counter-Reformation, but we need to note that there is also an original kind of component to it, okay? So the Counter-Reformation against the Reformation, the Council of Trent, basically, just steamrolled over heresies, let them be anathema if they don't agree with the doctrine, okay? As far as the Council of Trent, I've got a little jingle here. The Catholic Council that's associated with the Counter-Reformation, that you've got the affirmation of church doctrine and the reformation of church practice. Okay, so the Catholic Church not changing a bit of their doctrine, but they are changing some practices. Okay, so they're willing to do that. So sale of indulgences, sure. Okay, why not? But oh yeah, we'll get rid of that. That's what I okay. Let me make sure I'm not misquoted on that. Sale of indulgences, we'll get rid of that. But as far as Martin Luther also questioned the authority of the Pope to issue indulgences to forgive sins. Now that's a matter of doctrine, so that's not going. So affirmation of Catholic doctrine, counter-reformation, reformation of church practice. Catholic Reformation. Now, they can be used interchangeably, but that's why there are two terms, and those terms are kind of nuanced where they emphasize another aspect of that. Okay, so that's what you're going to be looking at there. Now, also remember Ignatius of Loyola and the Jesuits and the spiritual exercises. Okay, and then Teresa of Avila, who is portrayed in the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. So Teresa of Avila being a very prominent figure in the Counter-Reformation, and we want to associate Baroque art with the Counter-Reformation as well as absolutism. Okay, so just real quick, a lot of people have joined us since this thing started, so I want to make sure that people know if you want to get some some more in-depth help, I offer online tutoring. Okay, now I also offer custom short videos on my website. So that's another thing that's offered. For some reason, I don't have that tab up right now, but that is available on my online store. You can order custom short videos for your class. Now, also, I've got, and remember, the tutoring rate is the same for individuals and for groups. Okay. Now, also, I've got an AP Euro midterm review page. So if you're reviewing later this evening, I've got this review page on tomrichey.net/AP Euro midterm. And I've got some videos picked out for you. Also, the Romulus Euro app. This is a nice little trivia app that for $2.99 at the App Store or Google Play, I think would be very helpful in drilling in that information you need, especially on your LEQs, DBQs. You can get Romulus Euro at the App Store or on Google Play. Okay, and so as far as that goes, just keep all of that in mind. All right, going back to Twitter, it looks like we've got some questions now. Okay. All right. So as far as that goes, let's see what we've got here. Let's see, the Peace of Westphalia. All right, so the Peace of Westphalia, that is, that's going to be what ends the 30 Years' War. Now, this ends, you need to remember 1648. This is the end of the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. That the Peace of Westphalia not only ends the 30 Years' War, but it also ends the era of the Reformation. No more is there ever going to be a continental war in Europe where people are killing each other with religion as the primary impetus. Okay, so as far as that's going, just make sure about that. Yes, always justice for Harambe. Harambe loved Christmas. Seren from Maine South High School got that for me. Got that for me a couple years ago, and I wear it around Christmas time. It is my favorite ugly sweater. Not that Harambe's ugly, but for the Christmas sweater thing, it's my favorite. Okay, so as far as that goes, that it's ending the era of the Reformation. And one of the things it does, it weakens the Holy Roman Emperor. Okay, so the Holy Roman Empire, which was never really an empire the way we think of it today, but it was really even less so by this time. And so the powers of the Holy Roman Emperor are reduced. Also, the Netherlands, the independence of the Netherlands is officially recognized. Also, the independence of Switzerland is officially recognized. So, while we wouldn't say, oh, this side won the 30 Years' War or something, this side lost or whatever, certainly the Habsburgs did not come out of that better off. And what we see is the Holy Roman Empire and the Habsburgs, their power's going down. And the ascendant power is France. Okay, so France is really the 30 Years' War positions France to become the preeminent power. I mean, this is basically Louis XIV is becoming king, very soon after this. And so this is really setting it up for that era of French dominance of European history. And remember, as far as the 30 Years' War itself, it starts with, being a local and religious conflict in Bohemia, which then spreads to the Holy Roman Empire. So you've got the Bohemian and the Danish phases. And then the later phases, now the earlier ones are local and religious, whereas when you get into the later phases, you're seeing that it becomes more political, more continental, a truly continental war. Okay, so that's a little something on the 30 Years' War. Let's see. As far as that goes, um, some influential artworks. I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if I'm going to get into specific works of art so much, but remember that with Renaissance art, okay, so, now I could pull up one piece of Renaissance art, the School of Athens, okay, because this one really, to me, really is the epitome of Renaissance art. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull that up, and we're going to take a quick look at the School of Athens as a piece of Renaissance art. Okay, so going there. All right, looks like we're sharing the screen. Now, what you see here, first of all, is perfect symmetry, okay? That Renaissance art is all about symmetry, whereas, Baroque art, for example, is much more about, let's see, so, let's see, Aeneas, please, Troy. Okay, so as far as that, this one here, now this is still a classical theme. Let's see if I can if I can pull up this painting that I'm looking for without pulling up a specific PowerPoint there. Okay, well, this has still got kind of the Baroque style. It's not the one I was looking for, but you see here, this is more Baroque with the lights and the darks, and you see movement here and action and a lack of symmetry, and there's some drama there. Now, this is a pretty low drama thing. This is just a gathering of philosophers. And notice how the colors are all very vivid and bright, whereas you see a lot of lights and darks here. So you've got vivid, bright colors, symmetry, and balance. Now you've got, of course, the linear perspective, giving it that 3D element. And then finally, classical themes. Okay, so in the middle here of the School of Athens, you've got Plato and Aristotle. You've got Socrates here, Diogenes over there, lots of other people. Now you've still got, again, classical themes are still present in Baroque art, but it's done in a much different way. And so what we see here is this predominance of classical themes. Now, remember, classical includes Greek, Roman, and biblical figures. So when you see paintings from the Bible or Michelangelo's Pietà, with, the Mother of God holding her son after he's died, that is that is classical. Okay, so the Christian tradition and the classical tradition, in the eyes of the Renaissance, really kind of go together. It's not like there's really one at the expense of the other. Okay, so as far as that goes, there. Let's see, Jerry. That's kind of a tough one there. Let's see. As far as that goes, Guy Montag. I'm just going to go ahead and notice you here on Twitter. Let's see. Let's go ahead and take Ethan's question here. What were the qualities of the new monarchs? I typically think about the new monarchs as kind of absolutism light. It's not getting all the way to absolutism, but they're starting the process. Okay, they're starting the process, and they're centralizing. It's like trying to move away from feudalism and localism and trying to centralize government, especially in terms of tax collection and religion. Try to take power from the nobility so that the royal treasury is more stable and independent. And typically, you want to focus on Henry VII in England and Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. Okay, so as far as that goes, oh my goodness, we've got Layla just snapped with her sister. Let me just make sure that let's see. Sorry about that. Let's see. Watching. This is Bornfeld, y'all. If you're watching from Bornfeld. Okay. So, all right. So I'm about to, while I'm here at Snapchat, I'm going to go ahead and recognize some people. Ethan Holbrook, Grant Foley, Julie, Angelica, Grace, Emily, Julisa, Jasmine, Nolan, Caden, Mackenzie, Trent, Troy, Mia, Ivan, or is it Yvonne since we're in AP Euro, right? Chase, King, Kenna, Renee, Riley, and McKenna. Thank y'all so much for those follows. All right. Let's see. Going as far as that. Now, Alex, predestination, we need to be very careful, okay? Because Calvin was a fan of predestination. Now, predestination is basically it doesn't matter what you do, what you think, anything like that. Okay. So that's Calvin. Now, Luther, on the other side of Calvin, you've got the Catholic Church and the Christian humanist who emphasize the contribution of the individual to their own salvation. Now, let's be clear. That's not to say, I mean, the Council of Trent said that if someone says that a person can save themselves through good works, let them be anathema. Okay. So let them burn in hell if they say nonsense like that. So the Catholic Church has never taught that a person can save themselves through good works, but it's just a matter of that Jesus has offered this salvation. And if you really want it, he's given you free will and you can take it if you want it. And so if you're acting in a way that is not according to the teachings of the Christian religion, then you're probably not a Christian. Okay. That's the Catholic perspective. Now, with Calvin, it's you're one of the elect or not, and if you're one of the elect, then you'll probably act like it. That's why Calvinists were so self-conscious about their behavior, even if their salvation had already been determined, because it wasn't like they expected to find a bunch of lowlifes in heaven or something like that. That if God has chosen someone, then he will give them his grace. He will force them to accept it, and they will live that kind of life. Now, Luther didn't believe in either of these extremes. Now, Erasmus and Luther had a back and forth where Erasmus wrote, Erasmus the Catholic, who had criticized, remember, church practices, but never church doctrines, okay? And so as far as that goes, then what we're looking at there is that Erasmus wrote a piece called On the Freedom of the Will. And Luther, in his response, I forget which one wrote first, but Luther called his On the Bondage of the Will. Okay, so it's not necessarily that Luther believes in predestination. Luther, see, with the Catholic Church, free will. Okay, free will plus grace plus faith, all of that kind of stuff there. Calvin, only the grace of God. Whereas Luther is experiencing, he's talking about justification by faith alone. Okay. Now, also by the grace of God, but by an act of faith. And you can all think about times where you're like, man, I screwed that up, where I did something that I didn't want to do. It's like I said something hurtful to this person. I didn't want to. I look back on it and I regret it. This wasn't really me. Okay. Now, that's Luther speaking to you. Luther said, simul justus et peccator, simultaneously saint and sinner. So for Luther, somebody can believe and they still commit sins, but it doesn't mean that they're not a Christian. That Christians commit sins because we're not completely in control of our free will. But don't quite put Luther in the same box as Calvin. Okay. So as far as that goes, all right, we've got it. Let's see. I'm got back to Instagram here. So as far as that goes, let's see who we've got here. Let's see who my new friends are. Troy Robinson, Ava Elizabeth, Riley Mayberry, Abelard Vazonjo, and JXHN.JPEG. All right. And Maya Grace, you're the best too. All right. So let's go ahead and see what else we've got here. Now, McKenna. Okay. McKenna, who I think you were one of the people I just called out for adding me on Snapchat. Thank you so much. Humanism and North Northern humanism. Now, what you want to say here is Italian humanism and Northern humanism. Okay, so Italian Renaissance humanism focused more on the individual and also focused more on secularism. Now, it's not that this was this and that was that, okay, because you're going to see all of this in all humanism, but Italian Renaissance humanism much more about the individual and a secular thing. I think about things like um, Machiavelli, the Prince, where he's not teaching you how to be a good Christian. Okay, Northern Renaissance humanism is more about reforming society based on Christian principles. So when you read a lot of Italian Renaissance works like Machiavelli's The Prince or Castiglione's The Courtier, you're seeing how to advance yourself, okay, how to be successful, how to be a gentleman, how to be shrewd, how to be political. And so you're advancing yourself. That's known as civic humanism. Now, then you look at Erasmus and More, the Northern humanist, Erasmus in The Praise of Folly. He's poking fun of social injustices that he saw there, especially concerning the Catholic Church. Now, he was a devout Catholic, but he believed that the church needed to be reformed. And the reason he thought this was because he was reading the Bible and he saw that the apostles were poor. And he's like, well, the bishops today aren't poor. So, what's going on here? The bishops are rich. We need to use this classical text, the Bible, in order to reform the church. And then Thomas More in Utopia, it's not about how to advance yourself, but he's following the tradition of Plato, which is also, this is humanist, looking at these Greek and Latin literature and writers. And so, he's using this to think about, what would the world be like if we were less focused on possessions and we didn't have distinctions between rich and poor and all of that. So he wrote Utopia. So that's more characteristic. Now, you're also going to see more like nudes in Italian Renaissance art. Of course, that's also, you've got, they're Mediterranean, whereas, it gets kind of cold in Northern Europe. So when you see Thomas More and Erasmus, they're always wearing fur coats because it's very cold where they are. And so let's see, Gus, you've got me as your profile picture there on Instagram. Ma Name Chef Lucas, we've got Kelpo Dealer, Christmassy Olive, Harley Sailor, and Will Rue. Thank y'all so much for the follows there on Instagram. And then, wow, it's rolling in. Kobe, let's see, Dakota, and Nina, Izzy, let's see, a Chinese dude. All right. So, and Cake by Ocean Man, is it? Okay. Can I go over the English Civil War and the Enlightenment? Now, that would take me a long, long time to do either of those. So remember specific questions. Okay. So Chloe has asked me, was Napoleon enlightened? And I think like my thoughts on that, I do think that it is appropriate, even though it's not the time period, but to speak about Napoleon as an enlightened absolutist, okay? Because Napoleon was, as an enlightened absolutist, Napoleon, he favored religious toleration. So the concordat with the Catholic Church, okay? So with the concordat, what we see there is that he's bringing the Catholic Church back, but not as the state religion, not as the official religion, but as the majority religion. So that's something that is very important there. Okay, so as far as that goes, the majority religion, I think that religious toleration is very very important. So I think that also Napoleon said, as far as, it's not like, I mean, he did seize power, but he also had plebiscites. Now, basically, a plebiscite is a word for an election, okay, letting all the people vote. And he's like, I want to know that the people support me. So Napoleon didn't claim to rule by, so much by divine right, but he claimed that he ruled because he had the support of the French people. And I think that's a very enlightened construct. And so as far as that goes, you're very welcome, Christmassy Olive, who's on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, now during the French Revolution, the sans-culottes, Girondins, and Jacobins. Okay, so your Girondins and Jacobins and sans-culottes, they're all French Republicans. Okay, so really the Girondins and the I mean, basically, it's all kind of, I mean, for a survey level course, we've got to be very careful, okay? Because I could go into distinctions between the Girondins, the Jacobins, the Sans-Culottes. Now, the Girondins and the Jacobins were typically bourgeois elements, okay? Whereas the sans-culottes, these are people who are working class, they're shopkeepers, artisans, workers. They wear long pants, okay? So instead of culottes, breeches. So basically right now, because I am wearing pants, I'm a sans culotte, okay? I'm not wearing breeches. One of these days I need to do a broadcast wearing breeches and, just like, hey, look, I'm like looking like Hamilton or Jefferson or somebody like that. But not today, okay? So right now, a sans culotte. When I think about sans culottes versus like the bourgeoisie, I think in terms of like white collar versus blue collar. That's something to think about because a lot of times people say bourgeoisie is the middle class, but the term middle class is so broad in the United States that you're really talking about with the bourgeoisie, the professional class, people who today we would call like white collar jobs, like people who work inside, they work with their, mind rather than with their hands. Whereas the sans culottes more of a blue collar, kind of group there that are they've got a different set of values, but it was really an alliance of the Jacobins and the sans-culottes that that produced the reign of terror. So just a quick thing there, but don't get too deep into the weeds there because it can get really confusing sometimes. Okay, so as far as that goes, Whoopi, I think I've got some of that stuff as well answered. Okay, so as far as that goes, what is the role of Parliament over time? Now, of course, I'd mentioned earlier that Parliament was really kind of an informal body that met here and there, like before James the First. Okay, before James the First and all of the the Stuarts and all of that, the Tudor dynasty and previous. It was a body that the king called whenever he needed money, whenever he needed or she needed tax. Okay, whenever the monarch needed tax, or whenever the monarch needed like approval on something really big, like a rubber stamp. So Henry VIII is like, okay, I'm leaving the Catholic Church. So let me call a parliament because I'm not going to go out here on my own. Okay. It's kind of like if anybody's seen Old School, where Will Ferrell is, is streaking. Will Ferrell's character is streaking. And then he looks back and he realizes that nobody is out there streaking with him. And so, with that, like when Henry's calling Parliament, he didn't really so much wanted their advice, but he's like, hey, I'm going streaking or whatever. And, I need to make sure that the country's behind me, that there's buy-in. So the king would call Parliament, king gets what they want. And then Parliament might say, well, if you want to do this, then you need to do this, this, this for us. And it was kind of a little bargaining session between the king and the Parliament. And then they go home. Parliament was not a permanent body before the Glorious Revolution. So it was really, the Glorious Revolution that settled that, okay, Parliament will meet frequently. There will be frequent elections. The monarch will not interfere with Parliament. But before the Glorious Revolution, this wasn't made clear. So ever since the Glorious Revolution, it's been Parliament, not the monarch, who has been really the, functionally the sovereign authority in Britain or the United Kingdom. All right, now the Lollards and the Hussites, that's not going to be on. I wouldn't expect to see that on the exam, okay, because both of those are really before before 1450. It's good to know this stuff for context, but you're not really going to know if you understand that these were two pre-Reformation groups of heretics. Then you're good. Okay, you should be good with that. It's interesting stuff, but it's not necessarily needed for the exam. Okay, wow, the chat is quite yeah. Now, remember, ladies, now the scientific revolution, big impact on the way that we think, okay? Which, of course, I think that we're starting to see a revival of like, spiritual practices and stuff like that. When you look today at like, people talking about yoga and meditation and that sort of thing. And you hear people talk about like chakra and the spirits and all of that. Now, that is really like, that's how people people used to think before the scientific revolution, that rationality was not as, like basically the scientific revolution elevated like reason and evidence and empiricism, rationalism over like spirituality, emotion, that sort of thing, and kind of got a process started from there, which, I think that we've seen in the world that we live in today in the West. Certainly there's a predominance of, okay, Western order, like rational, orderly thinking and that sort of thing. But it's like the scientific method is like we think like this. Now, of course, there's some research starting to come out now about the human brain and the way that we learn. And, some of these institutions that have been set up, since the Enlightenment, who knows where we're going. But the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution certainly, trended like what is seen as valid thinking in terms of rational thinking, in terms of presenting specific evidence, and not just like, I have a feeling about this or something like that. So that would just be kind of a quick version there on the scientific revolution. All right. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, let's make one more little round through social media. We've got Elizabeth Hellman, Kalia, Nowyan, Quentin is following me, Emmylou, Kevin, Suha, Jake Zam, Avery Kakook, and let's see, I love the live stream. Okay, helping a lot. Thank you so much. Pop T97. We've got Hayden, Original Roger, Evans Dotis, Emma H. Andrews, Pranav, and MISHM. Okay, so thank y'all so much for the follows there. Now, remember, as far as what we've got going on with remember, online tutoring's available. Custom short videos. Like as soon as I finish this, I'm going to record some more custom short videos. I'm shouting out to classes and teachers. And just one more quick round through Snapchat. Thank y'all so much. Schaefer, David, John, Danielle, Jackson, Jake, Olivia, Jonathan, Malord, Emma Johnson, Shrey, and Cameron. Thank y'all so much for the support there. All right, so go to Twitter. Okay, we might have a little bit of stuff to wrap up here. Okay, inductive versus deductive reasoning. Chloe, I've got a video on that. I'm not gonna try to oversimplify that. There is a video on YouTube. I think it would be very helpful. Y'all remember, I'm about to go for the night, but as far as that goes, Mr. Watson's first period class, that's a good question, Ethan. Now, I'm thinking probably, just off the cuff, Napoleon probably let him know you're probably not going to get your head cut off or something like that. The table of ranks in Russia, Dr. J, is that Peter the Great is going toward a meritocracy. Okay, so a meritocracy, and service nobility. Okay, this idea that you see in Russia and Prussia, and really this is kind of the absolutism thing, that it's like being a noble is not just about living on your land and managing that land, but also rendering a service to the monarchy. And on Peter the Great's table of ranks, everybody started at the bottom rank, no matter what family you came from. And so this was going toward a meritocracy. Now, HM 10482, it's not so much how did feudalism change over time, but what changed about, this trend from feudalism to absolutism, and really even from there, toward, nationalism. Then we've got European integration, a lot of stuff that would take a long time to talk about. Hopefully I got some good information out there. These things can be, kind of all over the place sometimes. But as far as that goes, wow, y'all have got some interesting stuff there on the chat. The chats are always interesting, are they not? So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, remember, check out the Romulus app. Remember, I've got custom videos and tutoring on the website. I've got a page that's into the description with some helpful stuff that might help you prepare for your AP Euro midterm semester exam, whatever you're calling it. And remember that my friends at Fiveable will be hosting a Kahoot game on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So you want to check that out, fiveable.me, if you want some more information about that. All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And it is always a pleasure.